Hey guys, I'm really excited to show you a project I've been working on over the past few months. I've started working on a full-sized Holochess table. About 6 months ago, I started sculpting, casting, and painting full-size Holochess monsters, and I figured a full-size table was the next logical step. A few people have already made tables, but my table is going to be a little different. My table is actually going to play a game of Holochess. Someone online, who's probably a little nerdier than I am, surprisingly, has written rules for the game of Holochess. It's called Dejarik. That's the proper name, I guess. And basically, you can actually play a game of Holochess with some die. So the way it works is each player gets 4 monsters, and each monster has its own stats. They have an attack stat, a defense stat, and a move stat. And basically the way it works is I can say, hey, I'm going to take my monster, attack your monster, you roll a die, I roll my attack die, which let's say he has an attack of 8. That means I'd roll an 8-sided die. And then they would roll their defense die. Let's say he has a defense of 4. He'd roll a 4-sided die. And whoever has the highest number wins the fight. If I beat him by enough, then I destroy his monster dies, and go on. So it's a pretty fun game. I've played it a couple times with my brother and my wife, and we've really enjoyed it. We've just played it on this little table with a set of die, but I'm starting to a new project where I feel like I can upgrade it to a full-size table, and I have an idea in mind, and I'm going to go over all that with you in just a second. Here's what I have so far. I've built a portion of the table by 3D printing it. I'm printing half of the table out using 8 separate prints. Each print is anywhere from 10 to 16 hours. So to print out all 8 of these is going to take me a couple days. I've done this over the past 2 days, so it's coming along. And of course, just to note, this was printed out on my Rostock Max 3D printer over there. And it is a 3D print, so it's very rough right now, but I am going to be finishing this so that it won't be obvious at all that it was printed out on a printer. And I'm actually already only put 1 layer of primer on this. I'm not really finishing it yet because I still have a lot to add on, but I'm confident that it's going to be very, very smooth. I've also printed out the keys themselves, and then these brackets, and right now I'm printing out these knobs, but I think later on I might actually have these machined or cold cast or something like that. And the keys themselves, I've taken a while to perfect, but I basically printed one out, finished it up real nice, and then made a resin cast out of that, and then I'm able to make as many as I like, so I'm going to need to make 27 in total. My first key wasn't quite right. I came up with this setup here, and what I'm using is I'm using these Cherry MX switches. My brother, who's a computer gamer, turned me onto these. They're basically used on mechanical keyboards, and there's different colors. This is a green Cherry MX switch, and the different color designates the resistance that you have when you press down. Green happens to be one of the highest resistance keys, and you'll hear it's got a nice little click when you hit it. And it's very, very satisfying to press. So this is the first setup I came up with the Cherry MX switch. And you can see it's got a nice click to it. This setup, however, happened to be too big. It didn't end up fitting on my table. The bottom ended up jetting out too far. And it also was a bit wobbly. So after a million prototypes of various sorts, I came up with a new panel. And this one, the MX switch is basically just set in there. And my buttons will have a little slot in them. So here's my master button. As you can see, it's got a hole on the bottom. I think you can see that. And these little keycaps will fit in there. And that keycap will connect to the top of the Cherry MX switch, allowing me to push it. So this setup is much sturdier. They're really satisfying to press. All 27 keys are going to be able to be pressed using these MX switches. I went ahead and bought a bag of 110 of these that I'm going to be using for the next 2 tables. And these just basically slot into my board. This is going to be the full length. There's 9 buttons on each of these racks, so that equals 27 when I put 3 together. And this right now is the master, so I'm not actually cutting this slot out, but on the real table I'll be cutting this slot out, seating these in so that they're flush, and running my wires out of these so that I can do all my soldering outside. Snap the Cherry MX switches on there, put the keys on top, and I'm good to go. My brother also made these great fonts that are going to act as the key covers. These are pretty much screen accurate. We were able to get a hold of some pictures and video of the actual keys used on the screen table. And using those, we came up with this scratch-made font that my brother put together. And he's actually made 2 of them. One is kind of a handwritten font, a more screen-accurate look, where it looks like it was drawn with a calligraphy pen. That's what these are. And the other is a much cleaner, nice, more how you would expect a nice clean table to have on it. So we're really stoked with the way these turned out, and I'm really excited to actually put these on the keys. So the table itself has 13 LEDs that go along the top. These are actually flat, round, acrylic colored discs. So I've been experimenting around with cutting out discs at the moment out of plexiglass without much luck at the moment. But I have some acrylic and some new cutters coming out next week, as well as some colored acrylic, so I'll be cutting out all these. And then there's 3 knobs here, 2 panels here, and then over here, a part I haven't printed yet has these 2 little knobs on it. So the current arrangement is going to be this first knob here is going to turn on and off my table. The second knob here is going to turn on and off the sound. And the third knob here is probably going to change the game mode. And what that's going to do is it's going to let me either play a game of Holochess or put it in sort of a display mode where when I press buttons, they make noises and lights flash and things like that. And it's more of just, in its standby mode. Whereas the other mode's actually going to let me sit and play a game, and the buttons are actually going to do actual things. And then over here, these 2 panels are actually going to be replaced with an LCD screen that's going to run behind them. And you'll notice there's 4 segments to this section. And each of these segments is going to be a monster that is on my team. So a symbol is actually going to appear here that represents the monster. And as they die, they'll disappear. So that'll show me what monsters I have left. And each player will have their own set of those. And then the last 2 knobs on the side here, one is going to control the volume of the sound for each player, and the last one's going to control the game length. It'll actually let you have a longer game or a shorter game, and I'll get into that a bit in the future. But this is basically the basic setup of the table. Now let's go into the electronics. Okay, so now that I've talked about how the table is laid out, I'm going to talk to you about the electronics portion of this project. I've been prototyping various circuit boards and writing a program that will allow us to actually play the game. I started a few months ago on this prototype board, and this was just a basic board that let me program on an Arduino Uno to do the rolls. So I had a button for each monster. These lights indicated whether or not it was attack or defense, and you could change the mode from attack to defense. And then pressing on the monster did a roll from 1 to 8, and these LEDs would light up. So once I had that working, I knew that I was confident that I could make a program with the Uno and develop a circuit board. So I moved on to a printed circuit board. I went ahead and made this circuit board using a etching technique using toner transfer, where basically you print toner on a piece of glossy paper, you put it onto a piece of copper-clad board, you iron it on, etch the board, and you've got a circuit board. So I actually designed this little circuit, and this new board was the same as the last one, only it was a little cleaner, and it incorporated the 13 LEDs that are on the table itself, and let me develop for the lights on the table. Same thing, I had 8 buttons, one for each monster. Once you attacked, it switched to defense mode. You'd press another button for another monster, and it would roll the defense. And these outs went into my Arduino Uno again. So this was my last prototype. So finally, I started developing a full-sized board. So this was my layout of the full-size board. this was going to let me incorporate all 54 keys and the 26 LEDs all on one board, so I could do a full development of the program that was going to power the table. So each of these indicated a button. These are the LEDs. There's the black and white side. And then the whole thing was basically powered with a bunch of shift registers and some outs. This is the circuit I designed that was going to run that program. And again, this was basically meant to just be a development board, not a production board, just one I could test the program out on, basically. So I'm going to show you that. All right, so I know this looks a little insane, and it kind of is, but basically this is my board. These are the keys on the white side. These are the keys on the black side. This first section of keys are my attack keys. Now, each key is an attack for a different monster. The second set of keys is my defense keys. Same thing, same order of monsters. This would be one monster, this is another, and so on. And then this last portion represents the monsters themselves. Each monster has their own symbol, and pressing this button assigns you that monster or shows you the statistics for that monster. I can get more into that in a bit. And then the last button here is a roll button. That's basically used for picking your characters. Whoever rolls the highest gets to pick first. But there's 25 buttons here. In between the sections is a blank button. In the film, there's actually one blank button, and the symbols are in a different order. So I actually had to rearrange the symbols themselves to try and make a logical game out of this board. So while the game seems extremely complicated, and it is a little, after playing a couple times, it's easy to get used to. And it's actually let me make all the buttons do something, which is a little insane considering how many buttons there are on this board. As I said, the game runs on 2 Arduino Megas. I'm also using 2 audio effects boards that I got from Adafruit. These let me basically communicate to these boards from my Mega saying, hey, play this sound. So when I press a button, if it's an attack or defense, or if it just happens to have been a certain amount of time and it wants to play an ambient noise, it sends that signal to the little audio effects board here. I also incorporated these little OLED screens. Now the actual table is going to have much larger LCD screens that are going to fit behind the panels here. It's probably going to have one large LCD screen, and I'm going to have to incorporate that somehow, but that's the current plan. And while these right now are showing text, later on they're going to show the symbol of the monster. And then I've just got some junky speakers here right now, and this was a Bluetooth speaker. But the actual table is going to have a power surge protector in it that's going to let me actually power a larger speaker, so I might even put some car audio speakers or something in there. So right now it's running on these little speakers. But that's pretty much the setup. 2 Arduino Megas running the program independently, communicating to each other over the RX and TX sections, and then these supplemental audio boards. Adding the OLED screen, adding the audio boards have drastically increased the size of the program. So like I said, while it could run on a smaller board, and maybe in the future I'll be making a portable version of this game without sound and without LCD, on the large table I do require much more memory. I've also incorporated a game length knob. And what this does is actually increase the game length by increasing the number of die that are rolled. And what that means is normally if you attacked someone, let's say you attacked someone and you had a roll of 8. Normally that would roll a 1 through an 8. Well, when I increase the length, it's the equivalent of rolling 2 8-sided die and dividing that number by 2. And what that means is your odds of rolling a 1 are much lower, as both die would have to actually roll a 1 to get the 1. And as I increase that, I'm increasing the number of die rolled, which makes it nearly impossible at the highest setting to roll a very high number or a very low number. They all tend to be mid-range numbers. And in the game, to actually kill another monster, you have to defeat them by a certain number. So if you only defeat them by 2, let's say, usually that means that you just get to push their character back. Whereas to actually kill someone, you have to, defeat them by a larger number. So this actually lets me increase the game length Playing it at 1 generally is a very quick game. Playing it at a medium setting is generally a more leisurely game. So I thought that was a pretty cool feature. The game basically starts off with each player picking their monsters. Now, it would normally work where each player rolls a die to see who picks first, and then they pick in sequence. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to pick monsters to show you how that works. So I'm going to pick these first 4 monsters. The first one is the Savrip. He's that big giant guy over there. So I'm going to press that. And what happens is over here, you'll see on this LCD screen, it says Savrip. Now that's the equivalent of up here, as we talked about before on the board, I will have the Savrip symbol right here on the LCD screen, letting me know that I assigned that monster. And you can see each monster has their own symbol here. So those symbols will show up on the LCD screens. Next, I'm going to pick the Kenton Strider. He's the big yellow guy over there. And you can see he makes a noise. And then I'm going to pick the Manuk. And I'm going to pick the, I think that's the Unguk or something. And you'll see over here, my screen now has all 4 of my monsters and so on. So now on the other side, I'm going to pick 4 more monsters for the other player. Okay, and you'll see that the LEDs flash, letting us know that the monsters have been assigned. Over here on the screen, you'll see we each have 4 monsters assigned to ourselves. So going back here, so now let's say I'm going to attack the other player. So normally you'd move your player on your turn, however many move spaces you have, and then you can choose to attack. So I'm going to pretend like I chose to attack. So these are my attack buttons. Now I happen to pick the first 4 monsters. So this first attack button is for the Savrip, and then the Kenton Strider, and then the Manuk, and then the Unguk, just like the order over here shows. So I'm going to hit this to attack with my Savrip. And I rolled a 3. So the player over here is going to see that I rolled a 3, and now they're prompted to defend. So I'm going to defend with my Slug. I rolled a 3 as well. So that would be a tie. Now that's pretty much where I've gotten on the program. There's a lot more programming to do where the monsters get defeated and whatnot. But that's what this board is for. It's letting me actually develop the game. I actually have nearly 100 sounds on this board at the moment, stored on the Mega. Each monster has almost 10 sounds. So most of the time when you hit a defense button or something, you're going to often hear a different sound for the same monster. Which is cool. So that kind of adds a lot. I also have ambient sounds, which means that whatever monsters are still alive will kind of make sounds here and there, letting you know that they're there, which will kind of add a cool factor to the table. Anyway, so this is where the project stands at the moment. I'm going to keep you guys updated on Facebook and on the RPF as it progresses, but it's just getting off the ground, and I think it's probably going to take a while. But I'm really looking forward to having a Holochess table where you can actually play a game, and I'm hoping to eventually maybe even offer these up to the public, as well as the electronics kit. My next step is actually to adapt this board to shields that go on the Mega. I've actually, if I can find it here, designed a one-side board that powers just one side of the board, and now I'm going to adapt this to actually be a shield that's going to fit over my Mega, which is going to make this whole setup a lot cleaner and nicer, and make it easier for people to plug this into their own table or buy one of mine maybe and incorporate it into that as well. Anyway, so that's where this stands. If you're interested, follow in the links below. And I'm also continuing to develop the monsters over there. I'll post a thread to those as well for those interested. Thanks for watching.